The maps had warned of the Whispering Woods' dangers, but they hadn't mentioned its beauty. Alastair Thorne paused, compass in hand, as sunlight filtered through leaves the color of emeralds and amber. 3 weeks of traveling had led him here, to the edge of the unmappable forest that had consumed 6 cartographers before him. "I won't be the 7th," he murmured, scratching his beard as he made another notation. Unlike his predecessors, Alastair didn't believe in curses or enchantments. There was always a logical explanation: unusual magnetic fields, shifting terrain, perhaps even hallucinogenic spores. Every mystery had a solution if one observed carefully enough. The air changed as he ventured deeper, becoming heavy with perfume and possibility. His instruments began to behave erratically. The compass needle spun wildly, and his carefully calculated measurements suddenly made no sense at all. "Fascinating," he whispered, recording every anomaly. He was so absorbed in his work that he nearly stumbled into the clearing before noticing it, a perfect circle where a woman stood watching him. She was tall and striking, with hair the deep purple of twilight and eyes like polished amber. Her gown seemed woven from shadow itself, flowing around her as if caught in a perpetual breeze. "You're either very brave or very foolish, cartographer," she said, her voice melodic and ancient. "Few humans venture this far into my domain, and fewer still return." Alastair straightened, meeting her gaze directly. "Queen Morwen, I presume. The legends hardly do you justice." A smile touched her lips. "Flattery won't save you from my forest embraces." "It wasn't flattery, merely observation. And your forest is remarkable, though I suspect its reputation for being unmappable is somewhat exaggerated." Her eyes narrowed. "You think yourself clever than those who came before you." "Different, perhaps. They sought to impose their understanding upon your realm. I merely wish to record it as it is." Morwen circled him slowly, her presence making the air crackle with energy. "And if what it is changes moment to moment, as my whims dictate?" Alastair smiled. "Then I'll note that too." With a wave of her hand, the clearing transformed. The trees bent and twisted, paths appearing and disappearing, flowers blooming and withering in seconds. The ground beneath his feet rippled like water. "Record this, cartographer," she challenged. Alastair glanced around, then calmly pulled a small crystal from his pocket, a rare artifact he'd traded half his fortune to obtain. He held it up, and within its facets the true landscape remained unchanged, the illusions stripped away. "Impressive deception, Your Majesty, but perhaps we could move beyond games. I've come to map the unmappable, not to be tested like a schoolboy." For a heartbeat, the forest fell completely silent. Then Morwen laughed, a sound like silver bells that seemed to surprise even her. 300 years, and I've never met a human who could see through my enchantment so quickly." The illusions faded, leaving them standing in a more modest clearing, though no less beautiful. "You intrigue me, Alastair Thorne. And you, Queen Morwen, have created a realm of extraordinary complexity. I would very much like to understand it, with your permission, of course." She studied him intently. "Understanding has a price." "Most valuable things do." A slow smile spread across her face, both dangerous and alluring. "Then perhaps we can reach an arrangement. You and I follow me to my castle, cartographer, and we shall discuss terms." As Alastair followed the Witch Queen deeper into her domain, he couldn't shake the feeling that he'd just stepped into a different kind of trap, one that no crystal could protect him from. Retry Claude can make mistakes. Please double-check responses. The Witch Queen's castle defied all principles of architecture. Towers spiraled at impossible angles, walkways connected chambers that shouldn't have aligned, and staircases changed direction when one wasn't looking directly at them. To anyone else, the palace would have been a maddening labyrinth, but Alastair found himself mapping it mentally with every step. "Your home is remarkable," he said as they entered a grand library with shelves stretching beyond what the room's exterior dimensions should have allowed. "Though I suspect it's designed to confuse unwanted guests." Morwen's lips curved into a half-smile. "And yet you seem entirely untroubled." "Spatial puzzles are a cartographer's bread and butter, Your Majesty." She gestured toward a table where tea had somehow appeared without servants. "Please, call me Morwen. Formality grows tiresome after the 1st century." As they sat, Alastair noticed how the light caught in her violet hair, how her amber eyes seemed to contain entire galaxies. She was beautiful in a way that went beyond the human, timeless and perilous and utterly captivating. You mentioned terms, he reminded her, forcing himself to focus on the business at hand. What exactly do you want from me? Morwen sipped her tea, studying him over the rim of a cup that appeared to be made from a single opal. My realm is changing. The magic that sustains it has patterns I no longer fully comprehend. I need it mapped, not just the physical terrain, but the currents of enchantment that flow through it. That sounds beyond the capabilities of traditional cartography. Which is why I need someone who sees differently. Her fingers brushed the crystal he'd used to dispel her illusions. Someone who can perceive what is, not just what appears to be. Alastair considered, and what do I receive in exchange? Knowledge, access to magical texts no human has seen in 1,000 years, secrets of navigation that would make you the most sought-after cartographer in history. She paused, her voice dropping lower. And my protection while you work. That last part sounds ominous. The Whispering Wood doesn't take kindly to being documented. Those who tried before you weren't merely lost, they were consumed. She leaned forward, and the air between them seemed to thicken. But I can shield you if we're bound by agreement. Alastair understood the implied warning. Without her protection, he wouldn't survive long enough to find the forest's edge again. How long would this project take? A season, perhaps 2. And I'll be free to leave once it's complete. Something flickered in her eyes. Was it amusement, disappointment, if you still wish to? The bargain felt unbalanced, tilted far too generously in his favor. Alastair had spent enough time among merchants to know when something valuable was being offered too cheaply. Why me? He asked bluntly. Surely there are more powerful mages or scholars you could have chosen. Morwen rose and walked to a window that overlooked her strange domain. For a moment, her regal composure slipped, revealing something almost wistful beneath. Magic users see only magic. Scholars see only what they've studied. But you, Alastair Thorne, you see connections, patterns in chaos. She turned back to him. And sometimes fresh eyes are exactly what's needed. He stood as well, crossing to join her at the window. As their reflections merged in the glass, he noted how they seemed to fit together. The Witch Queen and the cartographer, both explorers of different sorts of wilderness. I accept your terms, he said finally. Morwen extended her hand. Then let us seal our bargain. When their palms met, a warm current rushed between them. Alastair gasped as golden light traced intricate patterns across his skin before fading away. What was that? He asked, examining his unmarked hand. A binding, she explained. My protection as promised, the forest will recognize you as mine now. The possessive pronoun lingered between them, weighted with unintended implications. When do we begin? He asked, steering the conversation back to safer territory. Tomorrow, Morwen's smile held mysteries he couldn't yet decipher. Tonight, rest. My servants will show you to your chambers. As Alastair followed a silent attendant made of living shadow, he couldn't shake the feeling that mapping the Witch Queen's realm would be simple compared to understanding its enigmatic ruler, or the unexpected warmth that still tingled where her hand had touched his. 3 weeks into his stay, Alastair found himself perched on a floating island of moss and crystal, meticulously documenting the convergence of magical currents below. The Witch Queen's realm had proven more complex than he'd imagined, not merely a forest but a tapestry of overlapping realities, each with its own rules and rhythms. You're making remarkable progress, Morwen's voice came from behind him. She materialized from a swirl of autumn leaves, her presence now familiar enough that he didn't startle. The eastern quadrant is particularly fascinating, he replied, not looking up from his notes. The magical currents there seem to be fraying. He heard her sharp intake of breath and knew he'd confirmed something she feared. When he finally turned to face her, the usual mask of regal confidence had slipped, revealing genuine concern. Show me, she commanded softly. Alastair spread his maps across the moss. Unlike traditional cartography, these were layered with translucent parchment, each sheet capturing a different aspect of the realm: physical terrain, magical currents, temporal fluctuations. Here, he pointed to a section where the lines had begun to blur and fade. And here, it's a pattern. Morwen knelt beside him, her shoulder brushing his as she studied his work. And what does the pattern tell you, cartographer? Their proximity made it difficult to focus. Over the weeks, their professional relationship had developed an undercurrent neither acknowledged openly, lingering glances, conversations that stretched into dawn, the occasional touch that lasted a heartbeat too long. "Your realm is destabilizing," he said finally. "The boundaries between different magical territories are weakening. That's why you needed it mapped. You're trying to save it." She straightened, the breeze lifting her violet hair. "I thought I had centuries before it reached this stage." "Before what reached this stage?" Morwen was silent for so long that Alistair thought she might not answer. When she finally spoke, her voice carried the weight of ages. "Magic is bound to belief, Alistair. As humans retreat into their cities of iron and science, fewer believe in realms like mine. Few remember the old ways, the ancient pacts." She gestured to the horizon where, in the far distance, the faintest smudge of industrial smoke was visible. "Their world encroaches and mine responds by fatting." Understanding dawned. "That's why you needed a human perspective. You're trying to find a way to stabilize the boundary." "Yes," she turned to him, eyes fierce. "I will not be the witch queen who lost her kingdom to forgetting." Alistair studied her, truly studied her as he would an uncharted territory. Beyond her beauty and power, he saw the burden of centuries, the loneliness of watching the world change while remaining apart from it. "I can help," he said before he could reconsider. "There might be a way to anchor your realm more securely." Her laughter held no humor. "And why would you do that? Our bargain was for mapping, not salvation. Once complete, you'll return to your world, as all humans eventually do." The bitterness in her voice revealed a deeper wound. Alistair wondered how many humans had entered her forest over the centuries, how many she'd allowed herself to grow close to, only to watch them leave. "Not all humans are the same, Morwen." "No," she agreed softly. "You've proven that much." Before he could respond, a tremor shook the floating island. In the distance, a section of forest shimmered, then briefly became transparent, revealing ordinary woodland beneath the magical veneer. "It's accelerating," she whispered, genuine fear threading through her voice. Instinctively, Alistair reached for her hand. The contact sent a surge of warmth up his arm, their binding, responding to shared emotion. Morwen looked startled, then cautiously laced her fingers with his. "We'll find a solution," he promised. She studied their intertwined hands. "Why would you care about the fate of my realm?" The answer came with surprising ease. "Perhaps I've found something here worth preserving." Their eyes met, and the air between them seemed to vibrate with unspoken possibilities. For a moment, Alistair thought she might close the distance between them, but instead she gently withdrew her hand. "The Northern Territory requires your attention next," she said, her tone deliberately professional. "There's a convergence of ley lines there that may prove crucial." As they prepared to depart the floating island, Alistair noticed Morwen watching him with an expression he couldn't quite define. Something between hope and trepidation, as if she stood on a precipice, unsure whether to step back or leap forward. What neither realized was that forces beyond the forest's boundaries had taken note of the Witch Queen's predicament, and the unusual human who had become entangled in her fate. Their privacy, and the delicate connection forming between them, would soon face challenges greater than fatting magic. The attack came at twilight, when the boundaries between worlds grew naturally thin. Alistair was alone in the Northern Territory, documenting a particularly powerful nexus of ley lines, when the air split open with a sound like tearing silk. Through the rent stepped three figures in silver armor, their faces obscured by helmets fashioned to resemble screaming visages. "The Queen's pet human," hissed the tallest. "How convenient." Alistair reached for his satchel, where he kept several magical trinkets Morwen had given him for protection, but a blast of freezing energy knocked him backward. His maps scattered across the clearing. "The Court of Winter sends its regards to Morwen," said another figure, voice like cracking ice. "Her time of isolation is over. She will rejoin the great courts, or her realm will be absorbed into ours." Alistair scrambled to his feet. "I'm just a cartographer. This political dispute isn't my concern." The third figure laughed. "Yet you wear her binding, you map her weaknesses, you are very much her concern." They advanced, silver armor gleaming in the fatting light. Alistair knew he couldn't outfight or outrun these magical beings, but perhaps he could outwit them. His gaze fell on his scattered maps, particularly the one detailing magical currents. "Before you take me to wherever you're planning," he said, deliberately stepping backward. "You should know that Queen Morwen anticipated your interference." The figures hesitated. "Explain." "Why do you think she chose a human cartographer, someone who could see the magic differently?" He kept moving subtly toward the largest concentration of ley lines his map had revealed. "I'm not mapping her realm to save it. I'm mapping it to weaponize it." The tallest figure raised a hand, crackling with power. "You lie." "Do I? Humans have turned iron and coal into engines of destruction. What might we do with pure magic?" He was standing directly atop the ley line convergence now. According to his maps, it was the strongest magical current in the Northern Territory, a river of power flowing directly to Morwen's castle. The Winter Court members conferred in whispers. Taking advantage of their distraction, Alastair pulled out the crystal he'd used to see through Morwen's illusions on their first meeting. As he'd hoped, it responded to the powerful magic beneath his feet, beginning to glow with increasing intensity. "Enough distraction," declared the tallest figure, turning back toward him. "You will." The rest was lost as Alastair drove the crystal into the earth beneath him, directly into the flow of magical energy. The resulting explosion of light and power threw everyone backward. The clearing filled with wild, untamed magic, responding to the only clear thought in Alastair's mind: Morwen. Miles away in her castle, the Witch Queen felt the surge like a scream through their binding. Without hesitation, she dissolved into shadow and wind, reforming in the Northern Territory amid chaos. The Winter Court members were struggling against tendrils of wild magic that seemed determined to expel them from the realm, and at the center of the turbulence lay Alastair, unconscious. Rage like she hadn't felt in centuries surged through Morwen. With a gesture, she condensed the wild magic into a focused storm, driving the Winter Court members back through their own portal. Then she rushed to Alastair's side, gathering him in her arms. "Foolish, reckless human," she murmured, her voice breaking as she pressed her hand to his chest, relieved to feel his heartbeat. "What were you thinking?" To her surprise, he opened his eyes, though they struggled to focus. "That I needed to find a way to call you." She helped him sit up, supporting him against her. "You could have been killed." "They were going to use me against you," he winced as he tried to move. "I couldn't let that happen." Something shifted in Morwen then, a wall built over centuries of solitude and self-protection beginning to crumble. She touched his face, her fingers trembling slightly. "Why would you risk yourself for my realm?" Alastair covered her hand with his own. "Not for your realm, Morwen, for you." The admission hung between them, impossible to retract. For a moment, the ancient Witch Queen seemed at a loss, her carefully maintained composure faltering. "I cannot afford such attachment," she whispered finally. "I am immortal, you are human. Such stories always end in grief." "All stories eventually end in grief," he replied. "That doesn't make them less worth living." Around them, the forest had grown still, as if holding its breath. The magical backlash had temporarily stabilized the fatting boundaries, but Alastair could tell it was merely a reprieve, not a solution. "The Winter Court will return," Morwen said, helping him to his feet. "They sense my realm's vulnerability and wish to claim its power before it fades completely. Then we need to find a permanent solution quickly." He swayed slightly, and she steadied him with an arm around his waist. "I think I might have an idea, but it's unconventional." She raised an eyebrow. "More unconventional than driving a crystal into a ley line convergence." "Considerably." He met her gaze directly. "It would require you to trust me completely, to be willing to change centuries of isolation." "And what would it require of you?" she asked quietly. His smile was tinged with both pain and certainty. "Everything, but I find I'm surprisingly willing to give it." As they made their way back to her castle, leaning on each other in ways neither had allowed themselves to depend on another in far too long, both knew that whatever solution lay ahead would transform not just her realm, but the careful boundaries they'd maintained between their hearts. Dawn broke over Morwen's castle, illuminating the grand terrace where she and Alastair had spent the night poring over his maps. Scattered parchments covered every surface, alongside ancient tomes from her library and strange devices of Alastair's own design. Both looked exhausted but resolute. "It could work," Morwen said, tracing a finger along the elaborate diagram they'd created. "But the cost is necessary," Alastair finished. He took her hand, no longer hesitant about the contact. Your realm is fading because it's isolated. Magic needs belief to sustain it, yes, but also connection. Their solution was radical. Rather than trying to reinforce the boundaries between Morwen's magical realm and the human world, they would selectively dissolve them, creating permanent anchor points where the two realities merged. These crossroads would allow controlled access between worlds, feeding her realm with fresh belief while protecting its essence from being overwhelmed. "The Winter Court won't approve," she said, though her tone suggested this wasn't a particular concern. Alastair smiled. "From what you've told me, the Winter Court rarely approves of anything." "True," she squeezed his hand, then moved to the balcony, looking out over her domain. "But there's a more immediate issue. Creating these anchor points requires both magical and human components, a witch to shape the magic and a human to believe in it," he finished, joining her. "I know." What he didn't say, what he didn't need to say, was that for the anchors to hold, the human component needed to be permanent. He would need to stay, 1 foot in each world, never fully belonging to either again. Morwen turned to face him, her expression uncharacteristically vulnerable. "You would do this, bind yourself to my realm permanently." "I would bind myself to you," he corrected gently. "The realm is merely where you happen to live." A blossom of color touched her cheeks, the first time he'd seen the immortal witch queen blush. 3 centuries of solitude, and a human cartographer dismantles my defenses in less than a season. "Not dismantled," he said, moving closer. "Remapped." She laughed, the sound warm and genuine, a very diplomatic correction. Their eyes met, and the tension that had built between them over weeks finally crested. Morwen closed the distance, her lips meeting his in a kiss that seemed to ignite the very air around them. Alastair responded with equal fervor, pulling her against him as if afraid she might disappear like one of her illusions. When they finally separated, breathless, the Witch Queen's eyes glowed with an inner light. "I've watched countless human lives unfold and fade," she whispered. "I never thought I'd risk my heart on such a brief flame." "Perhaps not so brief," he replied. "The anchors will change me too." It was true. Their research suggested that a human bound to multiple anchor points would absorb enough magic to extend their lifespan considerably. Not immortality, but centuries rather than decades. "Still a blink to one such as me," she said, though her smile belied the melancholy in her words. "Then we'll have to make each moment significant." He brushed a strand of violet hair from her face. "Starting now." They spent the day in final preparations, and as twilight approached, the time when boundaries naturally thinned, they stood ready at the first anchor point, a clearing where a massive oak grew exactly atop a ley line confluence. The ritual began simply, Morwen channeling magic through her hands into the earth while Alastair drove specially prepared markers into the ground at precise intervals. But as the spell progressed, complexity mounted. The air grew thick with power, colors swirling in patterns that corresponded to Alastair's maps. The oak tree began to glow from within, its bark transforming into something between wood and crystalline magic. When Morwen spoke the final words of the incantation, Alastair felt the change ripple through him, a connection forming not just between him and the anchor point, but between him and the Witch Queen herself. Their binding, once a simple protection spell, deepened into something profound. The ground trembled as reality shifted. For a moment, 2 worlds existed simultaneously in the clearing, the magical forest and the ordinary one beneath. And then they merged, the boundaries between them becoming permeable rather than absolute. Exhausted but triumphant, Morwen collapsed into Alastair's arms. "One down," she murmured. 6 more to go." He kissed her forehead. "We have time." Over the following weeks, they established the remaining anchor points, each one strengthening both the realm and their connection to each other. With every completed ritual, Alastair felt himself changing, his senses sharpening, his understanding of magic deepening. Not becoming immortal, but no longer entirely mortal either. The final anchor, the 7th, they placed directly in Morwen's castle, in a tower room that Alastair had claimed as his own. As the ritual concluded, binding castle to cartographer and Witch Queen to her chosen consort, the entire realm seemed to exhale in relief. The dangerous instability that had threatened to unravel everything stabilized, replaced by a new equilibrium. "It's done," Morwen whispered, her arms wrapped around Alastair as they stood at the tower window. watching as the lights of a small human village became visible in the distance, the first controlled crossing between worlds. Not done, Alastair corrected, turning to face her. Just beginning. She smiled, the weariness of centuries finally lifting from her eyes. A new map for both of us. With plenty of unexplored territory, he drew her closer. Though I must warn you, I intend to be very thorough in my explorations. Her laughter, once so rare, now came easily. I would expect nothing less from my cartographer. As they sealed their future with a kiss, magic swirled around them, not wild and chaotic as before, but harmonious and balanced, a reflection of what they had created together. The Witch Queen and her human consort, bridging worlds that had drifted too far apart, proving that even the most entrenched boundaries could be redrawn by those willing to see beyond them. In the forest below, flowers bloomed out of season, glowing with gentle light. The Whispering Wood had a new story to tell, one of a queen who learned to trust and a man who chose to believe, and its whispers would carry the tale between worlds for centuries to come.